Okay, so we had sloka number 6 in chapter 6, and we're going to graduate to the sloka number 7 here. If I can just repeat what we had discussed, that he's talking about that a person who has become yoga rudha, that is, he has already established himself in jnana nishtha, and he's no more required to sort of undertake external activities, nishkama karma, without any craving for the results thereof, and all these paraphernalia which are expected to be complied with if you're still at the level of karma yoga. You are an aruruksha, aspiring to ascend to a higher level of self-consciousness. Once you have done those karmas, those processes for purifying your inner consciousness, and you are a yoga rudha, you're established in yourself, in your consciousness, then you are your only friend, or your mind is your best friend. And your mind is your best friend because that's the only way you can sort of lift yourself out of this ocean of this material world, all the sensations, all other associations, and sort of go beyond millions of moments of connectivity between your senses and their objects, and the consequent feelings, sensations, everything that you pass through. And you reestablish yourself in a meditation on the self, on Ishvara, the Lord. Atmeva atmano bandhur, atmeva ripuratmanaha. And why so? Because at that level, the fundamental truth remains that it's the mind who can be your best friend and worst enemy. And then in the next sloka, bandhuratmatmanastasya yenatmeivatmana jitaha anatmanastu satrutve bharti tatmeva satruvat. And in that sloka, he explained that there are two categories of sadhakas. One set of people who have sort of won over their body-mind complex through rigorous self-discipline. And in such cases, their mind is their best friend. So these are qualifiers being given. On the other hand, those who are yet to sort of achieve that mastery over their mind, their emotions, for them, the mind continues to behave like an enemy. So the sloka 6 is, in a certain way, an elaboration underlying the reasons as to why it's a friend or an enemy. And that very point is further elaborated in sloka number 7, where Bhagavan says, Jitatmanaha prasantasya paramatma samahitaha sitosna sukha dukkeshu tatha mana pamanayoho. What he's trying to say is that a person might ask this question: what is the rationale, for example, for this whole sadhana of being a yoga rudha? Why should we try? Why should we make so much of hard work on our consciousness, on our thoughts? Why should we try to sort of ascend to a higher plane? What do we get out of it? So he's saying, because if you do so, you're going to be a jitatmana. And once you have become a jitatman, then what happens? You are a prashanta. Prashanta antakarana vishishta purusha, somebody whose mind is at peace with itself. And in that level, he has a direct perception of his own self. Samahitaha. He's kind of in a state of samadhi, self-awareness, disconnected from the external world. Shitosna sukhadukkeshu. And the benefit is not that he is able to see himself, because the clutter has been removed. And his consciousness has become much more transparent. There are no obstructions, there are no distractions. And therefore finds it very easy to connect with himself. But that alone is not the main benefit. The other benefit is that this particular connectivity with the self makes the attraction of this world and all the pain and frustration that you associate with this world lose their relevance so far you are concerned. And therefore, there are two ways you can talk about it. There are real physical experiences of discomfort. Like, for example, if somebody makes you sit on a hot pan, or it's summer heat in North India, or in Eastern and South India, which is very humid and hot, or extremely cold conditions, for example, in northerly Himalayan region, you cannot say there is no pain. Yeah, there is some physical pain. And then there is a subjective aspect to it. You may not necessarily be passing through a very difficult, adverse physical condition, and yet you may be feeling great pain inside. And why? Maybe because somebody is trying to humiliate you. Somebody is trying to criticize you, put you down. And in that kind of a situation, or somebody is praising you. It may be a very hot and humid day, and you may be sweating, you aren't feeling very comfortable, but someone suddenly appears before you at some place accidentally and says, "Oh my God, what a wonderful person you are. I haven't met too many people who are so good like you." Despite the summer heat, you have a feeling of, you feel good because somebody's praising you. So he's hitting at two aspects, the objective and subjective aspects of pain and pleasure. Shitosna sukha dukheshu, which is the physical aspect, and mana pamana. Mana is praise, adulation, right? And apamana, calumniation, stressful talk about you, somebody who misbehaves with you, subjects you to some humiliation. Mana and apamana. And so this fellow is kind of beyond this and he's very happy. Now let's look at how our great Acharya, Shankaracharya, interprets it, and then we will have a look at how the other scholars, especially Madhusudana Saraswati, make sense of it. So, jitatmanah iti, jitatmanah karya karanadi sanghata atma, jito yena sa jitatma tasya jitatmanah prasantasya prasanna antakaranasya satah sanyasinah paramatma samahitah sakshad atma bhavena vartate ityarthah kincha शीतोष्ण सुख दुखेषु तथा मानपमाने च मानापमानयोः पूजा परिभवयोः. He stops there. Very brief and very crisp in his language. What he's saying is that who is a jitatmana? There's a beautiful way in which Anandagiri is kind of commenting on what Shankaracharya he says. Prakarshana uparata bahyabhyantara karanasya paramatma vikshepana punaha punaha anabhibhuya mano nirantaram chitte prathata ityarthaha. So this karyakarana sanghata, this body-mind complex that we are, as we keep mentioning that, karya and karana. Karana is the causal aspect and karya is the product aspect, the consequence aspect. Sanghata is this combination that we are. There's a subtle aspect, there's a karana sarita, right? We have done that Panchakosha Viveka while we studied Tattva Bodhana Muvata. So here what he's saying is that the person who has won over his mind and his body is just not about one aspect. He's a jitatma. And he is prashanta. That means prashanta antakarana, prasanna antakarana visishta. Right? And the person who has in such a way achieved a victory over his subjective and objective existence, his physical and emotional aspects, is a jitatma. Tasya, of him, jitatmanaha, of that jitatma, prashantasya, prasanna antakaranasya, who has a very peaceful mind because he has mastered his inner and external universe. And therefore, he's at peace with himself. He has no trauma, no excitement, and no sort of mental turmoil that normally people pass through. Sataha sannyasinaha. Why he's introducing the word sannyasi? There are two reasons for it. One, the 5th chapter dealt with what? Karma sannyasa, sarva karma sannyasa. And Bhagavan sort of has clarified that, oh Arjuna, right now you are in a state which requires that you engage in meaningful activity without getting trapped in it in an egoistic manner. If you bring in your ego that you are the karta and you are aspiring to have enjoyments which sort of follow out of your activities, you become a bhokta, then you have ahankara and mamakara and you are trapped because there is karma bandha. The karma will create a bondage when your ego is active. However, you sort of surrender all that you are doing to me, and I'm going to take care of all that yoga and kshema aspect of you. You become niryoga kshema. I'm going to be yoga kshema, Bhagavan assures. And you do it for sattva suddhi, for purification of the consciousness. Once you have done it, you are ready for sarva karma sannyasa. If you remember, in the 5th chapter, Bhagavan clarifies it to Arjuna that jnana sahita sannyasa will succeed. It will bear some fruit. What is that fruit? Ajnana nibriti. There is nothing positive to get because why? We are already liberated. We just don't recognize it. That's what Vedanta is going to say. So we'll be able to take note of this aspect of our existence, which is the fundamental aspect that we are nitya, suddha, buddha, mukta. And we don't recognize it. But we'll be able to see that when the obstructions which are preventing us from seeing that fundamental truth are removed. That is ajnana nibriti. And the moment ajnana is removed, ignorance is removed, what happens is called knowledge. But this knowledge is not the way we use the word knowledge to know something, because here the something you know is outside of the knowledge. So there is a knower, there is a known, and there is a process of knowing. But in this Vedanta, at the ultimate level, the knower and the knowing and the known become one purified, unified field of consciousness. That is that Satchidananda Swarupa that we have been talking about. What Bhagavan is saying here is that he's samahita. And what does it mean, the sannyasin word, why he brings in? Because he sort of recognizes that a person who is still in a family situation, or he's doing a job, or he has a social responsibility, maybe he's a political leader, or he's CEO in a company, or maybe he's a farmer, an industrial worker, whatever he is. When there is a requirement that you have to constantly connect with the external world, and their roles and responsibilities, the onslaught on your senses of this external world is very strong. And the senses, given their own nature, billions of births of connectivity with this external world, will naturally develop an affinity to stay connected. Then you cannot turn to the self. Therefore, he says, Sataha sannyasina paramatma samahitaha. It's kind of hinting that this sloka has in its vision who is the guy who can actually reach there. He's a sarva karma sannyasi. He has withdrawn from the external world because he has completed his responsibilities. He has satisfied himself and everyone else. Yes, is dharma artha kama moksha. He is in the 4th stage right now. So he is not under any pressure to perform any of the responsibilities assigned to him, either by the society or by his family or even by the spiritual texts. He has finished all that. And therefore, he can be samahitaha, samyak rupena ahitaha, sakshat atma bhavena vartate ityarthaha. What does it mean? Aren't we ourselves? Are we different from ourselves? Why is he saying sakshat atma bhavena? He exists as pure self. What does that mean? Are we different from ourselves? No. What Bhagavan Bhashyakara Shankaracharya is hinting at is that in a normal situation, when we are constantly interacting with the external reality, the social, the political, the economic, religious, all sorts of associations and engagements, it's very difficult for us to know the pure consciousness that we are. So it's kind of wearing different kinds of masks. And we have to remove these masks to look beyond it and be united with ourselves. And therefore, he's saying, Sakshat Atma Bhavena Vartate. That means We shall not exist as a man or a woman, as a father, as a daughter, as a son, as a philosopher, as a scientist. These names and forms have to be dropped. And what remains is the pure consciousness. And there is no awareness of the individual self. And therefore, he says, Sakshat Atma Bhavena Vartate Ityartha. Kincha. He further adds, Shitosna Sukha Dukheshu Tatha Manopamane Cha. And the external physical sources of comfort and discomfort, as well as psychological causes or reasons for happiness or sadness that we pass through, mana pamana yoho, mana or apamana, puja paribhavayoho. So somebody worships you, respects you, touches your feet, bows before you, and you have a great sense of happiness or satisfaction that you're getting respect. Or somebody defeats you in an argument, misbehaves with you, shouts at you, then you feel defeated. So either of these two, these sort of lose their relevance to him. And he will sort of explain in the next sloka how that actually works out. Okay? But before we go there, we sort of look at how Madhusudana Saraswati kind of explains these two slokas, this particular sloka. Sitosna sukha dukheshu chitta vikshepakareshu. So what he's saying, this Sita and Ushna, heat and cold, these dualities, what do they do to us? They sort of are causes as to why our brain gets scattered. And it sort of entertains a lot of thoughts and feelings, right? We say this is a very, very hot day, and the mind sort of moves away from the inner self and engages with why this is so hot today. Why is it so cold? Why is that person so harsh with me? Why this particular person loves me so much? Either way, the mind is traveling away from yourself, whether you are happy or you are sad. Chitta vikshepakareshu, this vikshepa, the mind is all over, it gets scattered. And the causes of this scattering, whatever sort of disturbs the mind, is rooted in what? It's rooted in these objects, sense objects, which could cause either comfort or discomfort. Satsuapi, and these are factual things. Tatha mana pamanayoho, puja paribhavayoho, chitta vikshepa hetvoho. And then also the causal aspects of pain and pleasure in the form of either praise or criticism. Sator apiteshu samatvena itiva. And he has an attitude of equanimity. Why? Because he's a prashanta, jitatma. Jitatmanah praguktasya jitendriyasya prashantasya sarvatra samabuddhya ragadvesa sunyasya paramatma swaprakasya jnana swabhava atma samahitaha samadhi vishayo yogaruga bhavati. So beautifully he introduces one new word. We sort of have read more or less the same sentence in Sankara Bhashya. So this Jitatma Purusha, who is in control over himself, who has mastered himself, what is he saying? Praguktasa, which has been already explained, this Jitendriya, the person who has won over himself, Prashantasya, Sarvatra Samabuddhya, he has a kind of, an attitude of equanimity. It's not getting disturbed easily. Raga Dvesa Sunyasa, it's neither feeling attraction or aversion. Neither feels very good about something, nor feels very bad about something. Paramatma. And he's saying that Paramatma Samahitaha. He's trying to interpret that in two ways. One is Swaprakasa Jnana Swabhava. What is the self all about? We have repeatedly talked about why the Atma doesn't require any external light to be visible. Like if you enter into a dark room, if there's an object, like for example, there's a chair or a table or a bed, you require light to be able to locate that. However, imagine if there is a light, there's a small lamp in a corner. You do not require another lamp to identify that lamp, right? And this Atma Vastu is Swaprakasha Jnana Swabhava. What is the nature of this self? It is not a physical object. It is Chaitanya Swarupa. And it doesn't require anyone to declare and name it as an object of knowledge, Ishwa Prakasa. It declares its presence on its own. So it's Sadbhavata and as well as its Purana, both happen simultaneously on its own, Swataha, Atma Samahitaha, Samadhi Vishaya. So it's in a state of meditation on itself, Yoga Rudhaha. Param iti vachedaha. He's saying that Paramatma, we could also make a sandhi over there and say Param. Prashantasya Param. Atma Samahitaha. So Param is that that supreme thing that one can realize. Jitatmanha prasantasya eva param kevalam atma. So this param is saying that only in case of a person who is jitatma and prashanta, that means he is that karma sarva karma sannyasi and jnana sahita. He's not somebody who has run away from home because he's scared of the responsibilities which he's supposed to take. Kevalam Atma Samahito Bhavati Na Anyasya. So this Param Sabda could also be be separated from Paramatma, Param Atma, and then you can say that only a select few are the ones who can ascend to this level to experience their own self in a state of perennial happiness, unaffected by external shocks and sorrows or stimulants or temptations. Tasa jitatma prasantasya bhavet ityarthaha. Now, the last sentence sort of mentions why we need to be a prashanta jitatma. What is the need for that? And he's explaining it. There's a beautiful sentence here. So, Param utkarshena samahitah samadhim prapto bhavati. This is what Nilakantha says. And then he adds one sentence there which is very interesting. Ataha samadhi siddhyartham mano jetabhyam ityarthaha. So please understand why you need to struggle. What is the rationale for doing so much of hard psychological work and spiritual work to control your mind and body, which otherwise wants a bit of freedom. It wants, because it's own svabhava. What is the svabhava? It's going to crave after whatever it's pleased with and is going to run away from whatever it feels is a source of discomfort. He's saying, because by doing this, apparently you are denying yourself pleasure by trying to control yourself. But you are actually aspiring for a higher level of self-connectivity, which gives you not pleasure, but happiness. In what sort of happiness is that? That is prashanta, prasanna antakara. You're going to have that level of peace within, so you don't have to crave after an external source of pleasure, right? So this is how he's saying, jitatmanaha swabandhuttam vibhrunati. And if a person has a doubt, why did you say in the earlier two slokas that only a jitatma, then he's mentioned, right? The person who has won over his mind, for him, his mind is best friend. Why so? That's why he's saying, jitatmanaha swabandhutvam vibhrunati. If you can actually master your body and mind, then your mind is your best friend. And that's one of the reasons why Madhusudana mentions that jitatmanaha iti, right? And there is Dhanapati also writes one interesting sentence I'm just mentioning. Etena sitadishu prakteshu jitatmano nirvikara chittasya parama utkarshena atma samahitaha samadhim prapto bhavati ataha samadhi siddhyartham mano jetabyam bhavati ityartha iti prayuktam. This whole sentence which we read briefly, and the reason as to why you need to control your mind, which is hinted by Nilakantha in just a very short sentence, is elaborated by Dhanapati, the great commentator defending the Bhashya, Gita Bhashya of Shankaracharya. He sort of says that you have to see this whole chain of moving from a state of dull consciousness, a lot of distractions, to a higher level of sublime consciousness, where you are experiencing inner peace. And that's going to happen when you can be a nirvikara chitta, a chitta without vikaras, right? And there is no, formations in the mind. It doesn't undergo too many changes. And parama utkarshana atma samahita. Then you can experience that meditation. A lot of people these days sort of give meditation lessons, right? They say that, okay, you come, I'm going to train you. They're guided meditations. You sit and they're going to read out something, or they're going to tell certain things when you have closed your eyes. It's kind of, a bit of a practice of hypnotism, which can be very, very helpful to overcome difficulties with your past experiences, or maybe something is hurting you within or whatever. So when you do that, that can be very useful. That's taken for granted, but it's not going to help you establish yourself in a state of samadhi unless and until you have disconnected your mind and your body from external temptations and stimulants. These are the distractions who sort of obstruct your unity with yourself, your connectivity with yourself. And that is how, yes, this is how the sloka 7 sort of comes to an end. Now, the next sloka, again, he's further elaborating it to define what is that state of equanimity is all about for that jitatma or that yoga arudha. ज्ञान विज्ञान तृप्तात्मा कुटस्थो विजितेन्द्रियः युक्त इत्युच्यते योगी समलोष्टास्मकाञ्चनः. What he's saying is that jnana vijnana triptatma, the person who is fulfilled with jnana as well as vijnana. What is jnana? Jnana is whatever is theoretical knowledge that you pick up from different kind of books. What is vijnana is slightly different. When you internalize all that learning that you pick up from different sources, maybe an acharya, maybe your spiritual text, and then you meditate on it and you internalize it and you experience it in your personal life, that becomes vijnana, becomes part of your wisdom. It's not knowledge anymore in a traditional sense. And the person who is satisfied, fulfilled with both jnana as well as vijnana, so it's not dry knowledge that he hasn't mugged it up from the books. He has felt about it, he has experienced it. Kutastu, and he's established in the deeper self, the pratyak chaitanya, right? The pure self that he is. Vijitendriyaha, again, he's repeating that same word, that jitatma, and here he's talking about vijitendriyaha. He has comprehensively defeated his senses. That means he hasn't destroyed his senses. You need your senses to be physically active. He has won over them. He has tamed them. He has trained them. They don't misbehave with him. Yukta means he's a yogi. That fellow yukti. Iti uchyate yogi. So because in that way he has become integrated within himself and therefore he's yogi. And then what happens to his life? Samalostas makanchanaha. Such kind of a person doesn't differentiate between a lump of clay and gold. Why? Because for him, these external objects neither have value as very high things to aspire for or as things to be despised. He has a feeling of equanimity. For him, there is no difference. If you say that you are a millionaire, he's going to smile at you the same way he'll smile at you if you say that you are a pauper or you are in distress. He's going to have similar attitude. He's not somebody who is affected by what the world, the samsara, considers valuable, because he has figured out for himself what is valuable, and therefore he is not distracted by the external material possessions which would otherwise attract the attention of a normal person. Let's look at how Bhagavan Shankaracharya makes sense of it. Jnana iti, jnana vijnana triptatma, jnanam sastrukta padarthanam parijnanam. He is defining each and every word. What is jnana? What is knowledge here? He's saying he is triptatma means what? Somebody who is satisfied, who is fulfilled, because he has jnana and vijnana, and he is now explaining each word of it. Sastrokta padarthanam parijnanam. So he has read the spiritual text, the philosophical books, so he knows the theories of knowledge, what is dharma, what is karma, what is kama, what is moksha, what is purushartha, what is ashrama. He knows about this nomenclature. And then he knows what is written in Bhagavad Gita, he knows what's written in the Upanishads. Vijnanam tu sastrato jnatanam tatheva swa anubhava karanam tabhyam jnana vijnanabhyam triptaha. First, let's look at the word vijnana. Vijnanam tu sastrata jnatanam. Whatever you have learned from the sastras, from the text that you have studied, tathaiva swanubhava karanam. Then you have meditated on them, you have internalized them, you have realized them. You have converted this theoretical understanding into a proper grasp of what they mean through an application of these ideas in everyday life. Tabhyam, that means by virtue of this jnana and vijnana, jnana vijnanabhyam, triptaha, is contented. What does that mean? Sanjata alam pratyaha. He has a feeling of paripunnata, comprehensive understanding. He has a alam pratyaya. Oh, it's enough. He has this feeling that I'm quite happy. He doesn't have any sastra vasana anymore. I want to read 5 more books. I want to write more articles. He doesn't have this craving that I want to have so many buildings or money or relations or whatever. Alam pratyaha atma antakaranam jasya saha. So atma, the word here, he's saying that Utasta Vijitendriyaha Vijnana Triptatma. The Atma here, you see, Atma word will mean different things at different places in Bhagavad Gita. So you are supposed to use your pencil to sort of write in the corner, underline and write what it means there. Otherwise, it will not make any sense. So here, Jnana Vijnana Triptatma means this Atma refers to Antakarana. You know, the mind or the consciousness, whatever you call, Antakarana. And then what he says, Yasya saha jnana vijnana triptatma kutasto aprakampo bhavati ityarthaha. Why is he mentioning this word kutastha? The kutastha or shakshi purasa, the kutastha, these words are often repeated in Vedanta. Now the kutastha, that word is used here, Bhagavan Shankaracharya is saying that he is not at all affected in any manner by the external, stimulants, whatever you call them, happiness or sadness in the form of urges, and he doesn't react to them. He's inside this. You remember in the chapter 2, from sloka 55 onwards, when Arjuna asks Stita Prajnasya ka bhasa, Bhagavan explains that whenever he is surrounded by a threatening environment, he's sort of like a turtle or tortoise. He withdraws his senses, like the tortoise withdraws his limbs and gets into the cell, and you cannot affect him. So that's kind of mentioned here, that he is kutastha. You cannot disturb him. He gets into himself, not in any physical manner, but with the power of his attention, of his focus, his ekagrata, his concentration on himself, awareness of himself or herself. Utosta aprakampo bhavati ityarthaha vijetindriyascha. And then he's also somebody who has won over his senses. Ya idruso yuktaha samahitaha iti sa uchyate kathyate. The person who is in that kind of resolution of his mind, that fellow is the one who can be referred to as a person. So yogi, you can refer to him as yogarudha, a yogi, and then what kind of a person he is? Samalostasma kanchano. Lostasma kanchanani samani. Yasya sa samalostasma kanchana. The person for whom a lump of clay and golden ball both mean the same, that kind of a person can be referred to as samalostasma kanchana. Okay, so that is how he stops there, and we will briefly look at how Madhusudana sort of discusses it. He brings it a little more interesting variation in interpreting it. Jnanam sastroktanam padarthanam aupadesikam jnanam. You see, Madhusudana Saraswati is a great scholar, so he'll always bring in a little more elaboration than what Bhagavan Shankaracharya has provided. What he's saying is that what do we get actually in this, whether you read Bhagavad Gita or Bible or Quran or Upanishads or any book, spiritual book you read, you get Upadesika Jnana, a lot of advice as to how you should be and what you should do. But these things do not necessarily mean anything until you sort of internalize them and experience them, make them your own experience. Until that point, these are dry words which you have remembered. You have understood and you have remembered. But you haven't understood them properly because they are not part of your consciousness. They're just mere words. So what he's saying, this Upadesikam Jnanam, Vijnanam is what? Tat apramanya sanka nirakarana phalena. You have any doubts about them? Maybe I heard this. Is it true? Is Atma only Sat? Everything else is kind of Mithya. Brahma Satya, Jagan Mithya. What does it mean? I'm seeing all these vehicles, people. We have an economy. We have a political system. And they say that it's all false. A lot of people have a lot of amusing response to this particular Vedantic sentence, this Upanishad Vakya. So whatever doubts you have, that they may not be easy to accept. They are very illogical. When you study deeper, you go deeper, you exactly know what they seek to convey. It's not the literal meaning of it that is going to make sense, but you have to reach the destination where they are trying to lead you through these words, right? And he's saying that when you have Sanka Nirakarana Phalena, when you achieve the ability to remove your doubts through an internal understanding of what is the text that you're reading means, vicharena, through analysis, through a lot of vichara, through reflection and contemplation over those sentences, tatheva tesam swa anubhavena, aparokshikaranam is most important word he's bringing in. What is paroksha jnana? Somebody tells us that Rama went to Lanka to bring back Sita. I wasn't there, you weren't there, right? We have heard it. And however, if you look at some of the teachings that is there in Yoga Vasistha, or or if you look at this text, Adhyatma Ramayana, a lot of philosophical debates are there, which is very Vedantic. If you read and then you try to make sense of it in your individual life, then you are doing what is Poroksha Jnana, what is coming through indirect speech to us. And then we try to put ourselves in the center of the universe of that theoretical body of knowledge. We try to make sense of it. And there is two ways in which we can connect with reality. Either is pratyaksha, which is direct perception, like I'm looking at this, this computer screen to talk to you. And I'm also sort of meditating on what I'm talking, which is inside. This is an object of my conversation or my thought process, which is not external to me, but it's within me. So aporoksha is direct perception, but doesn't have to be physical pratyaksha, which means for an object which is outside of you. But when you are meditating on yourself, your very consciousness is what you are meditating on. That is aporoksha. So aporoksha, when they have become a very personal knowledge, tabhyam triptaha sanjata alam pratyaya atma chittam jasya satatha. The person who is kind of having a sense of contentment or fulfillment because he not only has theoretical knowledge or understanding about what the self is, but he has meditated on it and he has sort of internalized this understanding by applying whatever he has learned in the form of advices in the spiritual text through living, through meditation. By applying all that he has learned in his everyday life, he becomes alam pratyaya sampannaha. It becomes a sense of fulfillment is there. He's very confident, not in the sense that he's very arrogant, but he's very quiet and humble because he has sort of, his understanding is very real, right? And then what he says, Kutasto Vishaya Sannidhau api Vikara Shunyaha. He's Kutastha. Kurmangani va Bharata. You remember that sloka in chapter 2. So even though the Vishaya is right there in front of him, whether it's a certain recipe you love, or a person you love, or a person you hate, or a situation you are very uncomfortable about. Even though it's right before your senses, you can see that, you can hear about it, you can smell it. There's no vikara in you. There's no Modification in your consciousness is a result of the connectivity of your senses with that particular object, which is a source of happiness or pleasure or pain for you. It doesn't create any ramification within, and therefore you are kind of a kutastha, vikara shunya. Atayeva bijitani ragadvesa purvakat visaya grahanat vyavartitani indriyani yena saha. So all this attraction and aversion that we keep reading in Vedanta, what happens here is that this particular person has gone beyond that, and his senses have been kind of quarantined, vaccinated with what? With viveka, with vichara. And therefore, because his mind is very alert and he's very self aware, even though his senses are subjected to the onslaught of external objects, he remains vikara shunya without any changes within. Ata eva heopadeya. So there are two things, here and upadaya. Here is what? What causes us pain. What is upadaya? What causes some pleasure. So here and upadaya, we want to get rid of whatever is here. What is pain or discomfort and whatever is painful, we want to get rid of it. Upadaya is whatever. Hyopadaya buddhi sunyatvena. But this fellow has gone beyond happiness and sadness, pleasure and pain. So for him, there is nothing here, nothing he wants to get rid of. There is no dvesha, he is no aversion to whatever is painful, nor does he experience anything which attracts him. Why? Because for him, there is nothing upadaya. He has a sense of equanimity, not in a sense that you would like to describe him as a stoic in a Western sense. He's not callous, he's not indifferent, he's self aware. He is not somebody who is without an emotion. He has a sense of equanimity and a constant awareness of his own self. It's not a negative attitude that I'm not going to allow anything to sort of affect me. I'm going to be like a log of wood. No, it's not like that. He's somebody who is positively connected with his inner self, and therefore he has neither enmity nor friendliness or attraction towards anything outside. Samani mritpinda pasana kanchanani yasya saha. So for him, a mritpinda, lump of clay, pasana kanchanani. So for him, it means the same. Whether it's a lump of clay, or it's a piece of stone, or it's some golden ornament, right? And he's kind of having no difference in his emotions towards these three things. Yogi Paramahansa Parivrajakaha. So here, yogi is not the hatha yogi or he's doing pranayama or he's a karma yogi. Here he's saying Paramahansa Parivrajakaha. That means he's basically a jnana yogi. Paravairagya yukta. So what is paravairagya? It's an extremely subtle level of vairagya where nothing sort of can disturb you. Vairagya normally can mean a lot of things. You have a smasana vairagya, and somebody dies, you are depressed for a while. You lose somebody in a relationship, you are depressed for a while. You have no attraction for anything, then everything returns back to you. There's something called Markata Vairagya. There is something called Jnana Vairagya. Jnana Vairagya it's a slow onset transformation of the consciousness. It doesn't happen in a day or two. It's your realization, first intellectual grasp, and slowly psychological transformation through meditation and the truths that you acquired by reading, by Sravana, Manana, Nididhyasana, and Jnana Vairagya happens. It's not about any external jerk that sort of pushes you into sannyas or anything. That's how we have completed the sloka number 8. And we have a few more minutes. We'll do one more sloka. Srihan mitrayur udasina madhyastha dveshya vandhusu sadhu swapicha papeshu samabuddhir visishyate. So now he sort of is explaining what his equanimity is like. He's now elaborating his attitude of equanimity. A person might ask, because you remember in chapter 2, Arjuna has asked Bhagavan, and from sloka 55 onwards, till the very end of that chapter, he goes on explaining in different ways. You please have a look at those slokas again. And he repeats how a person is in a state of peace, why he's called Sita Prakhya. What he does when in Samadhi Avastha, what he does when he's conversing with anyone, what he does in his Vipthana state. So, he does what for Lokasangraha, he's full of compassion, Dukhe Sonad Vignamanaha, Sukhe Suvigataspruha, all that he mentions there. I'm not going to repeat them all over again here. What he's saying now is specifically at the cost of a little repetition, but Bhagavan has been doing it. You know why? Out of compassion and love for all of us, because we are kind of dull-minded. We can't grasp this truth if it's spoken in very brief language. I mean, you have Mandukya Upanishad, just a few lines, right? And people say that if you master that, you don't need to read any Upanishad. Why? Because that's meant for a very advanced student. Now, here he's saying, with a bit of elaboration, what exactly it means for a person who is Yogarvita, how does he relate to this world with regard to specific objects or specific persons, right? And that's what he's explaining. Srihan, who is Srihan? Pratyupakaraka. So, and let's first look at how Shankaracharya explains, because then we will sort of look at, okay, Kincha, Srihid ityadi sloka ardham ekapadam. So this whole thing, Srihan mitrayurvidasena madhyastha dveshya bandhusu. This is just one word, seventh case. Okay, so this whole thing is just one word, and you have to break them because this is a samasita word. So you have to open that up. Each word, Sririd, that is the first word in that. They are together. It's a kind of a composite word which has been formed. So Sruhid ityadi. So what is Sruhid iti? Pratyupakaram anapekyo upakarta. Who is Sruhid? Sruhid is a very good word, right? We sometimes use this word for very enlightened people. Sruhid is a person. He is not calculating what benefit you are going to cause to him or what loss you're going to cause to him by his own nature, because he is kind of enlightened or compassionate. He is very rich in empathy and love for others. And therefore, without any calculation, he gives you unconditional love. Pratyupakara. That you will do something in return to him or her, she or he is not sort of calculating that. Without doing apeksha of this, without taking that into consideration, upakarta, he helps you. He's an upakari person. Okay, he's Suhrid. And what is mitram? Snehavan, who has affection for you. Now, that means it's because of a relationship he has with you, he's going to help you. If that fellow would meet another person in a similar distressful situation as you, he may not help that fellow, but he'll help you. Why? Because you are a good friend. That is mitra. Arihi, who is Ari? Arihi, is Sattu, enemy. Udasino na kasyachid paksham bhajate. Udasina is a kind of neutral. He's a stoic person, Udasina. And he's indifferent. So he doesn't take any side. If there's a quarrel or something, he just looks at both of them and says, he doesn't even ask, why are you fighting or anything. He just looks at them. If there's a quarrel in a marketplace, the Udasina will be the majority of people who are kind of indifferent. They just look at this whole drama which is going on. They don't get into it. However, there will be some people who will get into it to solve this problem. You know who are they? They are Madhyasto. Yo Viruddhayor Ubhayor Hitaisi. They want benefit from the warring parties, right? They are the mediators. There's a quarrel, there's a conflict between two countries, and there's a third country which sort of comes in to play the role of a mediator. And he's a Madhyastha. And Dvaisya, Atmano Apriya, if you don't like somebody, he's somebody who deserves to be hated or to be treated as an enemy. So he's Dvaisya. Dvaisya means what? It deserves to be subjected to your Dvaisya, your aversion. And then what? Bandhu. Sambandhi iti etesu sadhusu sastranuvartishu apicha papeshu pratibaddhakarishu sarveshu etesu samabuddhi. Sadhu swapicha papeshu. And then he is taking another, combination of opposites. What is this, opposites? One is sadhu, somebody who is a straightforward, nice, moral, ethical person. The other one is a papi, somebody who is a sinner, given to doing things which are not approved by the spiritual texts, by the society. Whether he is a sadhu or a papi, pratisuddhakarishu, something which is prohibited. Let's imagine that he has violated another person, has practiced violence or something. Sarvesu etesu, and if you include all of the people, etesu samabuddhihi, he has an attitude of equanimity. There is no differentiation in his mental attitude towards all these people, friend, enemy, right? A siddh, or a madhyastha, or a udasina, or a a dharmatma, or a papatma, whatever. He is absolutely having same feeling towards all. Kaha. That means Vyaktivishta. Who is this fellow? What is this Samabuddhi? Kaha. Kim karma iti abhyaprita buddhi ityarthaha. Okay, who is this guy? And what am I supposed to do? He doesn't have these kind of questions coming up in his mind, and therefore he doesn't get into any vyapara, any operational involvement. He doesn't take up any decision. He doesn't want to do anything. He's in a state of equanimity. Visishyate. This visishyate, samabuddhir visishyate, that means he is special. Okay? But there is a Patha Veda in certain other text. Shankaracharya says, Vimuchyate itiva pathantaram. So it means that those days there were these manuscripts. They were not printed books. There was no digital copies available on the internet when Shankaracharya was writing his commentary. So he has found in certain manuscripts that he looked at that it says that samabuddhi vimuchyate, vishishyate. So this fellow is special because he has this attitude of equanimity. But you can also say that this sort of a samabuddhi, sampanna vyakti or sadhaka vimuchyate, gets liberation. That means liberation isn't meant for everyone. It's meant for this special yogarudha person. Yogarudha sarvesam ayam uttama ityarthaha. Visishyate vimuchyate va iti pathantaram yoga rudhanam sarvesam ayam uttama ityartha. So there's a kind of repetition. I don't know why that sentence is repeated. Could be a print error. What he's saying is that among all the sadhakas who are doing jnana nishta, who have sort of graduated as out of karma nishta, and now they are in a state of meditation, having read all the spiritual texts, they have also reflected on the meaning thereof, and they have both jnana and vijnana, and they have an attitude of equanimity. Such people are uttama. They have highest qualification for moksha, for atmajnana. That is what is entering, right? That is sloka number 9. Now, quickly, we have maybe okay. I think the little that is there. Okay, there's nothing much in Madhusudana, so let's stick to the time discipline and we stop here. And then we sort of will take up the little that is left from Madhusudana tomorrow. And if you have any questions, you can ask, and otherwise we'll sort of do the Santi Mantras. And meanwhile, thank you all, those who are watching this YouTube channel. And you can subscribe to get alerts in time, and see you tomorrow to take up the next sloka in chapter 6, that is sloka number 10. Thank you all. Hari Om.